Dr. N. Sri Kumar is an assistant professor of philosophy in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. He is a gold medalist for MA Philosophy from the Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam. He did his MPhil and PhD in philosophy from the Central University of Hyderabad and specializes in the areas of philosophy of language, continental philosophy, and hermeneutics. He has been into the academic profession since 1995 and has taught in Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kaladi, Kerala and BITS Pilani, Rajasthan before joining the IIT Madras in 2003. Dr. Sri Kumar has published articles in various journals and has presented papers in national and international seminars. Some of the courses he offers include European philosophy, contemporary German philosophy, Introduction to Indian philosophy, philosophical hermeneutics, philosophy and critical theory, and philosophy of language.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series in philosophy on Phenomenology and Existentialism, part 8. Before we start the lecture, let me introduce two students, Mr. Badrinath and Mr. Lenin. In today's episode, we will be covering the following topics. The natural world thesis. This is a topic which we have already discussed in the last lecture. I will be continuing with that. The value interference in human existence. This is also a topic which we have already discussed, already mentioned in the last lecture. Then the constituents of natural attitude. Acts relevant in natural attitude, occupation in natural world, natural attitude and the philosophical attitude, and finally the phenomenological method. These are some of the topics which we are going to be engaged in the following subsequent lectures also, but today we will start with natural world thesis. Natural world thesis is the world and my status a part of the world. It deals with that, and the world of the differentiation between the world of facts and the world of values, the objects and my users with them, and the relationships, my relationship with the objects in the world. This is what we will get a broad spectrum of what we mean by natural attitude. And let me clarify what is the natural world thesis. I experience things not as they are, but as beautiful or ugly, as pleasant or unpleasant, agreeable or disagreeable. I encounter objects of use. Say for example, this table for keeping these books, the computer, the papers, etc. So everything in this world has a use for me. It is related to me in a particular way. My relationship with the world, I relate myself with the objects in the world as well as with people, other people in the world. So that is why it is both a world of facts as well as a world of relationships and values. And again, I am aware of other persons. See here, there is a visible difference between objects in the world and other human beings, other fellow human beings. So how do I see them? I am aware of other persons, not just as persons, but as friends, enemies, strangers, relatives, students, colleagues, etc. See here also we could see the interference of values coming in, the relationships coming in, my relating with others, other objects coming in. Again, the world as a whole, I repeat, the world as a whole is always already given as certainly existing. The world is already there for me. So this certain existence, the existence of the world is a matter of certainty. The world is already there for me. I find myself in the world. Later on, when Husserl discusses about the life world, the doctrine of life world, the thesis of life world, there again he says that I find myself in a world in between objects and other people, a web of relationships and all that. And again, the belief in the existence of the world as a whole is not the result of an activity of thought or judgment, but it is a presupposition for all judgment. This is what belief in the existence of the world as a whole is not the result of an activity of thought. See, it is not a matter of deducing something from a primary principle, that the belief in the existence of the world as a whole, but rather it is a presupposition. It is a prerequisite for all judgments. All our judgments presupposes our belief in, or our knowledge, or our presupposition about the belief in the existence of a world as a whole. But as far as at this moment I am concerned, this world is there for me. I see this world, I experience this world, I live in this world with others, and I relate myself with the objects and other people in the world in a very natural way. So, here I am not raising any fundamental doubts about the existence of the world. We are coming to that. The next issue is, you can always have a philosophical attitude which is entirely different from natural attitude. Now we are discussing about natural attitude. Okay. So, here it is a presupposition of all judgment. Again, I posit particular thing as existing as there. There is no question, I do not raise any question about the existence of an object. I assume that it is there. Now about myself, how I regard myself. Here I regard myself and all other persons, see all other co-subjects, as belonging to the one spatio-temporal reality which is always already given. So this is something I find myself here. It is almost a commonsensical attitude, we can say. We can call it as a commonsensical attitude even science also is nothing but an extension of common sense in a very different way. So, as belonging to the one spatio-temporal reality which is always already given. I repeat, always already given. It is there. I assume its existence. I presuppose its existence. And then I am related to other items in the world. Again, something which we have already said. Then natural attitude. See, in this world, when I live in this world, what happens? The complex forms of the spontaneous acts of consciousness. This is something which the spontaneous acts of consciousness is always there when I live in this world. But at the same time, there are certain other things also. Theorizing activities of consciousness. We are yet to arrive at a philosophical attitude. Here, the direct mention is about theorizing. How do you theorize? What happens when you theorize? The various theorizing activities. Let us see what are those. You observe, then you conceptualize. You need to, whatever things you observe, you have to really supplement those observations with concepts. So you have to conceptualize. Then meaning through description, you have to legitimize it. So you use description to legitimize it. Then collecting, counting, presupposing, and inferring. These are all activities, or rather the activities of consciousness, or the mental activities in which you are involved when you theorize, theorizing activities. Now when we come to the various acts and states of emotion and will also play a major role in this part of natural attitude, where there is approval and disapproval, there is joy and sorrow, desire and aversion, hope and fear, decision and action, etc. So these are all the acts and states of emotion and will with which you operate in the natural world. So we have seen three things where it is almost commonsensical, number one. Number two, you theorize it. Number three, here various acts and states of emotion and will. You are emotionally related to the world of objects and other beings in this world. Now your occupation in the natural world, all the acts or states together with the pure acts of the ego in which I become acquainted with the world as immediately given to me are included in one Cartesian ego. See, all the things which we have already discussed, they are included in one Cartesian ego. The Cartesian ego is the subject, the empirical subject. See, Cartesian ego is always an empirical ego. It is not a transcendent ego, it is in the world, very much part of the world, which has the ability to think, conceptualize and all that. And most of the time in this world of objects, facts and other beings, most of the time I am engaged in the world of objects, facts and other beings, but occasionally I am preoccupied with pure numbers. See, the world of mathematics, the world of pure numbers and the laws that govern them, the world of numbers, which is not part of the real world. Real world in this sense is the world of facts and the objects and other people. They are slightly different. we can call them as an ideal world.
The world of number belongs to the ideal world?
Yeah, but here when I say ideal world, don't confuse it with the ideal world of Plato. Okay, here because there is a tendency whenever we talk about ideal world, there is we immediately relate with Plato. It's slightly different from Plato because Platonic world.
In the empirical world.
Yeah, it's not in the empirical world in the sense
Sense.
Not only that, we are not dealing with things which are spatio-temporal, okay, which are beyond that. We are dealing with, in a sense, it is a world of essences, we can say. We are coming to that. Now, being there for me, the natural world. See, let us briefly see the distinction between the natural world and the world of numbers. These are the two things which are there for me. In natural world, consistently there for me. They are always there for me. Whatever I do, the natural world is there in the background. So long as I live naturally and look in its direction, the world is always there, always present for me. It is presupposed in one sense. And when we talk about the world of numbers, they are there only when and as long as I occupy the arithmetic standpoint, only when I do that, only when I theorize, only when I make myself engaged with the world of numbers, they are there. But still these two things are important as far as the natural attitude is concerned. Now, natural world proper, it is an intersubjective domain. As all of us know, it is an intersubjective domain where I am not the only person in this world. There are other people, I interact with other people, I communicate with other people, I understand what others say. So, it is always an interactive intersubjective domain where each subject apprehends it in his own way, yet see, this is one thing, each subject apprehends the world in his own way, that is true, but at the same time all individuals can in principle understand each other. So, this is what is meant by intersubjectivity. See, this is a necessary prerequisite and presupposition for all science, knowledge and everything that is rational. In the absence of this intersubjective domain, knowledge and science will become impossible. And when we focus on the world of numbers, it is an ideal world. I mean, in a very basic sense, we can understand it as what I have already said, that they are not spatio-temporal. We are not dealing with objects and entities which are spatio-temporal, but we are dealing with ideal entities. Now, when I look at it, the natural world is present to me and remains at the background of my actual consciousness, but is not directly connected with the ideal world which I consider. This is what, see, when I look at it, even when I theorize, even when I am engaged in understanding the world of numbers, the natural world is present to me and remains at the background of my original actual consciousness, but it is not directly connected with the ideal world which I consider. Now, we will see natural attitude and philosophical attitude, how they are different. This is a question Badri has asked some time back. I mean, one issue which you raised, whether it is subjective or objective. And there I said we enter the domain of philosophy, because the question of objectivism and subjectivism or relativism, they are all philosophical issues. Now, here the standpoint of philosophy, of course, is definitely different from the standpoint of natural sciences and common sense, because philosophers always adopt a very peculiar standpoint. They have a very different approach to reality, understanding reality and all that. Natural attitude, see, let us briefly see this. It accepts the possibility of knowledge as a self-evident fact. No common man or layman in the street would raise philosophical quote unquote questions about their getting knowledge about the world and all, but a philosopher would definitely have to ask it. Even a scientist will never raise fundamental issues about what is this world, how do I get knowledge about this world and all that. He is concerned about how to get knowledge about the world. He is not particularly concerned with knowledge as such. That is a philosophical issue. Philosophy raises doubts. See, philosopher, you have a traditional picture of philosopher as a great doubter in Descartes, where he raises Descartes doubts everything that can be doubted, everything that is possible to be doubted. It raises doubts about such assumptions. The self-evident givenness of objects of our natural attitude are questioned by the philosopher. Philosophy again raises fundamental doubts about our very common accepted beliefs concerning the existence of an independent external world, validity of knowledge, etc. See whether I will come to that, the existence of an independent external world. The first question is whether there is a world independent of my mind. See, this is a great idealistic problem, whether the world is my own creation or whether there is a world which is outside my mind. Then does our experience and knowledge correspond to anything outside me? This is something, whether there is anything which is outside me to which my experience, knowledge, and when we come to linguistic philosophy, language, utterances in language or linguistic expressions correspond to. Can we have exact knowledge about something that exists outside? So that knowledge is, as you mentioned, objective, it becomes objective, whether there is something to which outside my mind it refers. So these are some of the prerequisites for scientific knowledge also, but philosophy is asking such questions and trying to find answers to these issues. Such doubts often lead to skepticism. This is the result. Often it leads to skepticism. We are genuinely having doubts about the very possibility of knowledge itself. See, can we ever know anything? When we discuss Kant, Kant has divided reality into two domains, phenomena and noumena, and noumena is the reality with a capital R, which constitutes the reality, which is unknowable, unknown. So we can genuinely raise it. This is the issue which Hegel has pointed out, the possibility of the noumena becoming anti-phenomena. The experience, the knowledge which we get is about the phenomenal world or phenomena according to Kant. So can we ever know anything? This is one question which philosophy raises very forcefully. How can I communicate with others and how do I understand others? See, how can I communicate with others? Because if there is something on which I can enter into an agreement with others, then of course communication is possible. But whether there is something which is objectively outside me, which can function, which can do the function of an objective criteria, that is a question. Nothing is indubitable. See, this is a shocking revelation, philosophical revelation. Nothing is indubitable.
Sir, with your kind permission, if I can interrupt you.
Yeah.
Can you please explain what you mean by this term indubitable?
See, the immediate response would be like this. You remember Descartes. Descartes, who is known as the father of modern philosophy because of his pioneering work, which has direct implications, which has to directly do with the concept of method and knowledge. Okay, how knowledge is possible, how objective knowledge is possible, genuine knowledge is possible, and here the criteria to which he refers is indubitability, something which can never be doubted, something which is beyond all doubts is the domain of pure knowledge. Only then you can have knowledge, otherwise you can have only opinions. So indubitability can be considered as the criteria for knowledge on the one hand, and also if there is doubt then there is no certainty. That is the next point, nothing is certain. And if there is no certainty, you can say that there is no knowledge, because knowledge is possible only when there is something certainly known, something which is there certainly known. Again, clarification is needed. Now philosophically we need some clarifications about the nature of knowledge, the object of knowledge, and about the means of knowledge. So here we need some clarification. How do we get knowledge? What is the role played by sense experience in getting knowledge, and what constitutes the domain of reality about which we have knowledge, whether it is this world of external objects or something else about which we can have genuine knowledge. Then one more, is there anything beyond the world of facts, beyond the world of state of affairs which we experience and which we see? Is there something which is beyond that? See, Kant has said that there is something which is beyond that. He called it noumena. And here philosophy, we could see paradoxically how philosophy is raising, or how philosophy is taking us to skepticism. It is raising certain issues which leads to skeptical conclusions, and now phenomenology against skepticism. So here it is here Husserl finds the historic role of philosophy. It can function, or it can do something to substantiate, to prove that skepticism is inconsistent, or rather we can really go beyond skepticism and have genuine knowledge, to tackle the problem of the possibility of knowledge, to say, prove that, or to assert that knowledge is possible. So phenomenology comes to the rescue of philosophy to assert and prove that knowledge is possible, the possibility of knowledge, to show how the natural attitude about the relation between knowledge and the objects known is erroneous. See, natural attitude, it believes, or it takes for granted that there is a relation between knowledge and the objects known. It believes that the state of the world exists as a pre-given fact, and we have knowledge about it, and our knowledge corresponds to the objects in the world. These are all unquestionable beliefs in the natural attitude, but there is some problem with these beliefs, and philosophy raises such problems, and it shows that the natural attitude is mistaken. So natural attitude vis-a-vis philosophical attitude.
How natural attitude is responsible for the skepticism?
No, natural attitude is not responsible, but what I mean is that in natural attitude takes for granted the existence of everything, existence of a world, and you believe that your knowledge is about that world. Okay, you experience that world and there is nothing beyond this world, but the question is that what is a guarantee that you can always have all the entire lot of traditional philosophical issues, like how can we say that there is a world outside my mind? How can I say that two of us or three of us are talking about the same world? How can I say that we have agreement? All these are issues, philosophical issues. So these would ultimately lead us to skepticism.
Yeah.
Okay, because natural attitude firmly believes that certain things are such and such, and here philosophy questions them, and that leads to skepticism. So natural attitude in that sense is responsible for our skepticism, because the whole idea of skepticism comes from that.
Yeah.
But you could see that the branch of philosophy which deals with all these questions, or rather the very possibility of knowledge, is epistemology, and epistemology raises such issues but is not able to give very precise answers. That is what Husserl finds it, and he is trying to see, if you see the history of epistemology, particularly the epistemological schools of modern philosophy, the empiricism for example, and even rationalism also, they all have their own respective doctrines about knowledge, how knowledge is possible, and often contradictory accounts. And then again Kant, all these people have contributed to the development of an epistemological tradition, but ultimately it fails to provide a very conclusive answer to the problem. It fails to provide an explanation how conclusively knowledge is possible. Okay, so here we can say that natural attitude is responsible to skepticism. Come back to the issue, and phenomenology is something which is being posed as against skepticism. It is against skepticism as it investigates the essence of knowledge. See, you have doubts, you have problems, you have uncertainties when you deal with something which is uncertain, something which is contingent. When you deal with the world of facts, you are not sure about it, there are a lot of contingencies. So you can never attain certainty as long as you remain within the natural attitude. But once you focus your investigation to a world which is not contingent but absolutely certain, what is that world? It would be the world of essences. So investigate the essence of knowledge becomes the task for Husserl, to find a solution for the problem concerning the real relations between knowledge, see, the meaning of knowledge and the objects known. This is a typical epistemological issue. Problem concerning the real relationships between knowledge, meaning of knowledge, and objects not. What is this? So, this epistemological track is being in a different way redefined by Husserl's phenomenology. We are going to see that, because with his theory of consciousness and his theory of intentionality and his theory of pure intuitions, he has redefined the whole epistemological problematic and tries to provide an answer with and substantiated it with a methodology which is called phenomenological method. The possibility of phenomenology as something, a discipline which supplements the philosophical attitude, which enables us to overcome skepticism and all other problems. So, now we will see how phenomenology as a method. We will be seeing in detail the phenomenological method later, but now we will see the relevance of this whole concept of conceiving phenomenology as a method. See, a specific philosophical way of thinking a method, see, which is different from other methods, and methodology of philosophy is different from the methodology of natural sciences. In Descartes you could see how the concept of method is being introduced vigorously and pursued also. So, here, different from the methodology of natural sciences, philosophy needs a method, what it should be.
Here in contemporary philosophical discussions, of course from philosophy of science we have Paul Feyerabend, and in philosophy of language Hans Georg Gadamer speaks about against a kind of movement which comes against a method.
Yeah, understand. See,
what's your comments on
right? Here, first of all, both the philosophers you have mentioned are after Husserl. So, Husserl's project is still foundational. Husserl's project is still foundational, while Feyerabend and Gadamer are anti-foundational thinkers in a sense. So, in Husserl still conceives philosophy, a methodology for philosophy, or rather what he calls phenomenological method, but he insisted that it should be different from the methodology of natural sciences. So, here philosophy is not based on the it is not based on the results of other sciences, as they are rooted in arbitrary preconception. So, philosophy needs a different method, a unique method of its own, and it is a method for philosophical inquiry, and from natural attitude to philosophical attitude. See, this method should take us from the natural attitude to a philosophical attitude, and finally to knowledge and truth. So, such a method, this is what Husserl envisages, and the logical and methodological process of science is different from the methods of philosophy. So, though the question of method is so predominantly present in natural sciences, Husserl is trying to take up this issue in philosophy also, but the method which he envisages is absolutely different from the method of natural sciences. And now let us summarize today's episode. We have discussed the general thesis of natural world attitude briefly. We have continued with the discussion today also. Then we have seen the mode of our existence in the world in natural attitude, where we have seen the two types, the two ways in which the spontaneous acts of consciousness on the one hand and the theorizing modes of existence on the other hand, where we are concerned with the natural world of facts and objects in the world and also other people. On the other hand, we are also concerned about pure numbers, essences. The contrast between natural attitude and philosophical attitude is another issue which we have discussed today, where we could see that philosophy adopts a totally different attitude, which questions, which doubts, which raises very serious objections to the natural attitude. And then the importance of phenomenological method. That is because we could see that philosophical questioning or philosophical doubt leads to a kind of skepticism which has to be tackled with the help of a methodology, and phenomenology comes with this methodology. With this we will end today's episode. Before that, the students can take some questions. Number 1, what is the central motive behind the overcoming of natural attitude? Number 2, how does the philosophical attitude leads to skepticism? And number 3, why does Husserl conceive phenomenology as a method? A question which you have raised. Why method? What is the relevance of that? So, the issue is that we are not discussing the nature of this method here, but we have discussed why it becomes important. Okay. With this, we will end today's lecture. Thank you.